Hello and welcome back to another Hitfilm tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can create the logo as seen at the start of Star Wars Battlefront 2 when you first load up the game. This will be using the neon path effect as well as some TV damage effects, so I'm going to be using Hitfilm Pro, but you can use Hitfilm Express for this, but you will require some add-ons if you want to export this. So let's get on with this tutorial. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a new composite shot. So I'm going to go new composite shot. I'm going to set the duration to being 18 seconds because that is about the length that the title is in the actual game when you first load it up. I'm going to rename this to being title text. In this composite shot we are going to be creating the base text as well as the lines. So this is like the template. So I'm just going to leave the other things the same and press OK. In this new composite shot I'm going to create a new text layer. I'm then going to go up to the text settings and change the font from whatever it was before over to Bell MT. So now I'm going to type Battlefront 2 in capital letters. Then I'm going to select it all and I'm going to scale this up. So in around 150 works fairly well. Then I'm going to play around with the spacing to make those two letter T's touch. So -40. That seems to be looking quite good. Now I want to center this on the screen. So I'm just going to go back to the selection tool, select the text, go over to the layout tab, select it, and then under align to, make sure that it's aligned to the center of the screen, but I'm also going to align it down the vertical middle. And this has placed it directly in the middle of the frame, and it's not based off of the anchor point, it is based off of the actual text layer. Okay, so now we've done this, I'm just going to go down to the timeline, press F2 and rename this layer. You can also right click and select rename. Now I'm going to rename this text layer over to being Battlefront. And this will just help me keep track of which layer is which, especially as we're going to have some more text layers for Star Wars up at the top and EA down at the bottom. So now I'm going to create a new text layer, and I'm going to write Star Wars, all in capitals again. Then I'm going to select this, go over to the text tab, and then I'm going to select the Star Wars font. It is called, the one that I've got is called SF Distant Galaxy. I got it off of defont.com and I will leave a link in the description for that. So I've already got this set up as I want it, and it's set to a -40 spacing. And I'm also just going to shrink this down in terms of the size of the text. I want to make this fairly small, but not too small, somewhere around 50. Then I'm going to go back to the selection tool, select the green handle in the viewer, and move it up, just above the F in the middle of Battlefront. Then I'm going to go down to the timeline and rename this to Star Wars. Then I'm just going to duplicate this by right-clicking and selecting duplicate, and it will create a duplicate of the Star Wars text. So I'm just going to grab the green handle up at the top and drag this below the F in Battlefront. Go to the text tool, select it all, and write EA. Then I'm going to drag this back up. I do want the EA in the title text to be slightly bigger, so I'm going to go for 60. Of course, if you wanted to change what the text was in the title, then by all means go ahead and do that. I'm just going to also rename this top layer to EA. I'm also going to create a new plane layer, and I'm going to set this plane layer to being black, and I'm just going to name this plane. Then I'm going to hit OK. And now this has covered up all of our text that we just created, so what I'm going to do now is press on the I button to hide it. So now I'm going to select the plane layer, grab the rectangular mask tool, and I'm going to draw a line, starting with the base of the S. Drag this over the B. It's alright if there is a slight overlap. Doesn't have to be perfect. So this is the first half of the top line in the text, and now what I'm going to go and do is right click on it and duplicate it. Then I'm going to open the transform settings and I'm going to select the position, just dragging it along on the Y to copy it over to the other side. Then I'm just going to line it up. I'm going to select both of these, right click and duplicate them, and then I'm going to go into the transform settings for the first one and change the Y. Then I'm going to change the Y position on position over to -120. That's just what works for my title, so if you've got a slightly different sized Battlefront logo, then you will have to enter different values. Then what I'm going to do is go onto this layer, and I'm going to zoom in and change the scale. However, this does extend it on both sides, so I will just have to keep correcting the X value as well, just to move it along. So then I'm just going to do the same thing to the other duplicate that I made. First thing I'm going to do is change the Y position over to being -120. That will lower it down. I'm also going to zoom in, scale it up, and then position it along the X. You want to try and keep either side of this as even as possible. In the actual logo there is some slight shaping to these two bottom masks, so I'm going to select it, go over to the freehand mask tool, and this will allow me to select one of the points, and I'm just going to drag this forward. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. And this has now created kind of that beveled look. What I'm going to do from here is grab the plane layer from the media tab. I'm just going to drag this above everything else. If you want to rename the first plane layer with all the masks on it over to being lines, then that's fine. So now we've got this new black plane layer, I'm going to go over to the effects tab and search for the neon path effect. Then I'm just going to drag and drop this down onto this plane layer. As you can see, nothing has happened. So I'm just going to go over to the Controls tab, open up the neon path, and say path from, and change it from mask over to being text, and then the layer, I'm going to choose Battlefront 2. And instantly you will see that the Battlefront 2 text that we typed out has been written using this neon path. So I'm just going to explain what this is doing. The path from you can choose between mask and text, which basically means it will take the outer lines of either the mask or the text, and then it will create a neon path. And the layer is referencing the different layers. So if I then selected the Star Wars text, you can see that it has changed over to referencing that Star Wars text layer that we created. However, if I selected text and on lines, nothing will happen because there is no text on that layer. So if you select the path from over to mask, you will see that the lines that we drew using masks will appear here. However, I'm just going to go back to using the Battlefront 2 logo and set it back to text. And now we've got this kind of cool looking outline. I'm going to do all of my base animation for the neon path inside of this effect, because then we can just copy it and target different layers so that then we don't have to do too much changing after all of this. So in the main logo for Star Wars Battlefront 2, the text generates in and draws itself. So what I'm going to do is set the extension all the way down to 0. At the start of the timeline, I'm going to start keyframing for the extension. Then I'm going to move ahead to around 5 seconds, and I'm going to set the extension to 100%. And this will now extend out the neon path. Also in the logo, the line is moving as it's being drawn. So I'm also going to start keyframing on evolution, and then I'm going to move to the end of the timeline and set this to a value of 7 times. Now as you can see, the blue line is rotating around the text. So as you can see, if I just run preview it, you can see that the line is now starting to be drawn by the first tip, and it will start to draw on the Battlefront 2 logo that we created using the text. Then when it reaches 5 seconds, the entire logo will be drawn in using this effect. So now if we play this through, you can see that the text is being drawn in with this line. Then I'm just going to go in and change a couple of the fall off settings inside of the path. I'm just going to change the start width to being 0.5. This will just create a slightly thicker edge. And I'm going to change the end width to being 3.5. This will just make the entire line 0.5 pixels wider. Then inside of the neon path controls, I'm going to go down onto the timeline and change the extension keyframe, the first keyframe, over to being smooth. This will kind of more ease in the animation, just making it feel a bit smoother. Of course, you can change the timing of these keyframes, you can change the path settings however you want. I just personally quite like how this looks. I am going to be getting rid of this glow, and you might be thinking, why? It's already got this blue glow which the text does have. Well, I'm going to be adding the glow afterwards in the next composite shot that we create. So This first composite shot is just going to be white and black, with all of like the distortion effects that we're going to be adding in a minute. So I'm going to go down into inner glow and just set the width from 60 to 0, and that will just create this white text, which actually looks pretty cool. Then I'm going to select the neon path effect, press F2 to rename it. I'm going to call this Battlefront Neon. Then hit OK. Then I'm going to right click on this layer, select duplicate, and then it will create a copy of the Battlefront Neon effect. I'm going to open up the properties for this Battlefront Neon duplicate and change the layer from Battlefront 2 to being Star Wars. And then I'm going to press F2 to rename it and change this to Star Wars Neon. And then I'm going to do this once more by right clicking, duplicating, renaming it to EA Neon, and I'm going to change the layer from Star Wars over to being EA. And now we've got all of these text values written in with the neon path effect. Something that I want to do is change up the starting evolution and the speed of the evolution by changing how many times it rotates for Star Wars and Neon, because as it's a smaller amount of text, it will go round faster. So inside of the Star Wars Neon, I'm going to go to the last frame, change the evolution from 7 times to 5 times, and then in EA Neon I'm going to change the evolution from 7 times to 3 times. Then I'm also just going to change the starting evolution. And this will mean that they will all start off at a slightly different point. Then I'm going to duplicate the Battlefront Neon copy, because that has the fastest evolution. I'm then going to rename this to Lines. And then I'm going to change the path from text over to mask, and change the layer from Battlefront 2 to Lines. And now, as you can see, it's created the lines that we created. I want to try and create the Battlefront to be slightly brighter, so I'm going to go into the Battlefront Neon settings, change the path settings, and change its start width over to 1. And this will just create that slightly more standing out look that just makes the Battlefront 2 part a lot wider. So now I want to add some distortion. I'm going to go up to the Effects tab and search for Scan Lines. Then I'm just going to drag and drop this below all of the neon paths and just place it there. Then I'm going to be increasing the frequency from 150 to something a lot higher than that. I'm quite happy with 500. And lower down in the scan line settings you can see that there is an option for brightness. I'm just going to turn this up, just to bring it back to being a brighter white. I now want to kind of come in and ruin it and make it all glitchy. So this already looks kind of hologrammy. Okay, so I'm going to drag on the TV damage effect below the scan lines. And as you can see, it's started to destroy this text in ways that we do want, but also in ways that we don't. So what I'm going to search for at the top in the search in controls tab, I'm going to search for enable. And I'm going to disable everything apart from horizontal hold. And as you can see, when we just have the horizontal hold on, it will just kind of distort it and make it look kind of glitchy. So then I'm going to search for horizontal hold. This will just open up the horizontal hold settings. I want to increase the amount of distortion we have at the start and how regular that is, and then decrease it towards the end. So on the first frame of my timeline, I'm going to start keyframing for regularity. I'm also going to change this to 0.8, and then I'm going to advance ahead towards 12 seconds and set this down to 0.10, because I don't want it to completely go. However, I do still want it to be a lot lower so you can actually read the text. So now we've kind of created this distortion that looks like it does. It looks somewhat like it does in the game. However, you might also note that some of the elements in the title come in at different times. So I'm now going to stagger the introductions of these different pieces of text using the keyframes that we created for the evolution and extension. So I'm going to go back to the start, and I'm going to open the controls for the Battlefront Neon, and I'm going to select these extension keyframes. I'm just going to move them ahead slightly. And this will just stagger their introduction so that then the lines come in first, followed by the text. I'm just going to go through and stagger some of the other pieces. And if you want there to be less distortion, then play around with the settings as much as you like to get the look that you're going for. And now we've created this base logo, which you can change the text, change the lines, and basically be as creative as you want with it. And now we're going to move on to the second step, which is making it glow and make it kind of look all blue and sci-fi-y. So I'm going to go over to the Media tab and create a new composite shot. I'm going to name this composite shot Final Comp. I'm going to set its duration to 18 and leave all the other settings the same. Then I'm going to hit OK. And this will now create a plain blank composite shot, and I'm just going to drag the title text, which is the plain text that the plain base of the logo that we've just created, into this composite shot. And now, as you can see, it's got the lines coming in and all of that awesome stuff. So then in the Effects tab, I'm going to search for Glow. I'm just going to drag and drop this onto the plane layer. Then I'm going to open the glow settings and just play around with these until I get a fairly nice glow. So in the end, I've decided I'm going to go for my first glow having an intensity of 1.1 with a threshold of 13%, a radius of 3, and the blend mode left at screen. Then inside of per channel intensity, my reds are set to 0.31, the green levels are set to 1.29, the blue levels are set to 1.94. I'm going to leave all of the advanced settings the same. Then under the second glow, the intensity is 2.6, the threshold is 21%, the radius is 155 pixels, the blend mode is screen, and then the color settings and per channel intensity are exactly the same as before. And then my third and final glow, the intensity is set to 1.4, the threshold is 30%, the radius is 191 pixels, the blend mode is screen, and all of the color settings are the same as before. Of course you could add more glows, less glows. I also just want to blur this slightly because I feel like some parts of this are a bit too crisp. So I'm going to go into the Effects tab and I'm going to search for Blur. And then instead of just taking the normal blur, I'm going to take the angle blur. And I'm just going to drag and drop this above all of the glows. And then I'm going to open up the settings for this and I'm going to change the length from 15 to 2, and then I'm just going to duplicate this angle blur, and then inside of angle I'm going to change it from 0 over to being 90. And this has just created kind of like a fairly subtle blur that just kind of helps smooth it out a bit. So the final thing that I'm going to do for this text is just animating it moving back in 3D space. So I'm going to turn the layer dimensions from 2D over to being a 3D plane. It will ask me if I want to add a 3D camera, so I'll just press yes. And then inside of the position, I'm going to change the Z value over to being 400. Then I'm going to start keyframing. Then I'm going to go to the end of the timeline and set this over to being 0. And this will just add a fairly small movement into the background. Actually, I might just up the first keyframe to being around 600. And that is this title created. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then please leave a like and subscribe, as that would be greatly appreciated. And also, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, it's at ndpproductions_workshop, and I post like test shots, micro tutorials, some other projects I'm going to be working on. If you have any suggestions for future videos that I could make, then please tell me in the comments below, and also if you have any questions, then please feel free to ask them below and I'll try to respond to you as quickly as I can. See you next time. Goodbye.